Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be answering the question, who's set to break out? These are going to be some year two players that you just can't ignore. In this episode, Joe and I are going to be alternating, providing 3 players each of who we think are set for a breakout here in year 2 in their sophomore season. So, Joe, why don't you start us off? Who do you got as your first breakout year 2 player?
All right, the first guy I'm going to talk about is quarterback J.J. McCarthy. Now, interestingly enough, he missed all of last season due to an injury. So technically, it's his second year in the league, but this will be his first true full year as a starting quarterback in the NFL. But, he's got a great situation with Kevin O'Connell as his head coach, guys like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and T.J. Hawkinson to throw the ball to, which really sets the table for McCarthy, to be poised for a breakout year this year. Sam Darnold, who came over, was really an afterthought, not only for fantasy, but just as an NFL quarterback as well. He joined the Vikings last year, finished as the quarterback 9 for fantasy. And, I think McCarthy showed enough in college that he was a capable quarterback. He also, is a guy who can create some big plays with his legs and his arm, and as well as being an efficient passer, as we saw, with that Michigan offense. He didn't have to do it himself. He had a really good run game, some decent options on the outside, and that's really a situation he lands with the Vikings here.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Kevin O'Connell offense, I really feel in some ways, and this is no knock on J.J. McCarthy, we have no idea what to expect with him. But his offense seems somewhat quarterback proof. I mean, we saw what Sam Darnold was able to do. You alluded to that. But also even a guy like Josh Dobbs, who kind of, took the league by storm for a little bit there based on how he was able to perform in the offense. So things have to go really, really wrong for it not to work out. I mean, they've got a solid offensive line. They've got weapons like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. They've got T.J. Hawkinson at tight end. They've got a lot of options in that offense. And with the play caller of Kevin O'Connell, I think J.J. McCarthy is just he's kind of a safe breakout pick. I think there's a lot of people who are on him right now who think that, he could really take the league by storm.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely is set up that way. And yeah, I'm sure he is a, popular player just because, we've seen, like you mentioned, all these quarterbacks, just being able to start on the Vikings and instantly be good for fantasy.
All right, so my first player I'm going to be targeting here for a breakout, a year 2 player. That's going to be wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I know what you're thinking. It was a big disappointment last year, so why should I expect anything different? Well, if you look at the underlying metrics, I think there's a silver lining here that I think is interesting. So Marvin Harrison Jr. had 1,566 air yards, and I want to say that was in the top 10 of all receivers. So that means that the ball was traveling his way, right? It was getting in his direction. These were not screens. This was, if you know what air yards are, they were sending them. But the real problem was the disconnect between him and Kyler Murray, and you could see that because in his total stat profile, he had 116 targets, 62 catches, 885 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns, but with only a 53.4% catch rate. So as you can see, I think the numbers kind of tell the story a little bit that they just weren't on the same page. I think coming into year 2 into this offense, I know Trey McBride was it was heavily utilized. I don't know if it's going to be as strong as people suspect. I think it's easy to just assume that whatever happened last year is going to happen next year. It doesn't happen that way. More often than not, it changes. So I think Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, I did see online, I thought it was kind of interesting. They posted a picture of Marvin Harrison Jr. from year 1 to year 2. I mean, maybe he bulked up a little bit, but he didn't look all that much different. But I think he's motivated. Remember, let's not forget, this is a guy who was the clear number 1 pick in dynasty drafts. And, then everything's happened with Malik Neighbors, and people forget about Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, it's crazy how much, people's viewpoints on a player can change in just 1 year. I mean, people are thinking, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the next fantasy darling. Now all of a sudden, people are just simply fading him and don't want any part of him. But you're not wrong. I mean, there is a lot left on the bone there for him to be had, and he definitely could emerge as this year two breakout. It just really requires him and Kyler Murray being on the same page. Like you said, it wasn't from lack of trying. He got the targets deep down the field. That's what he was excelling at. That's what everyone was expecting. Just for whatever reason, he just couldn't come down with the ball.
Yeah, and I looked. It was number 6 in the league as far as air yards. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't know if you knew that or not, Joe.
Yeah, no, that was an interesting stat. I mean, obviously, I knew they tried some deeper plays down the field with him. They didn't work out, but didn't realize he was number 6 in air yards in all of the NFL there.
Well, the other thing too is they didn't really add to that receiver room at all. I mean,
Yeah.
they still have Michael Wilson. They have Greg Dortch. They've got Zay Jones. It's really him, Marvin Harrison, and Trey McBride. It's really what it is. So it's a question of can Kyler and MHJ get on the same page? And based on the price of what you'd have to pay for him, whether you're in redraft trying to get him or whether it's in dynasty, I like the dip. I'm buying the dip.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, the opportunity cost last year as his rookie was a lot higher than it is this year. That's for sure.
I mean, in some redraft leagues, he was getting drafted in the first round. Right.
Yeah,
I mean, it
right.
just, what a change. So, all right, Joe, who do you got for your second year two breakout player?
All right, we're going to stay at the wide receiver position here. Going to go with wide receiver Rome Odunze, who had 101 targets last year, 54 receptions, 734 yards, and 3 touchdowns, and ultimately finished as the wide receiver 49 in PPR leagues. But he's got a new head coach in town with Ben Johnson, which will hopefully turn things around with Caleb Williams. That was a big, part of Rome Odunze's disappointment. But then the big piece is Keenan Allen's no longer on the team, which vacates 121 targets last year. Odunze and Caleb, they seemed to have a good rapport last year. Whenever Caleb was in trouble, saw that even, in training camp, but in the season, whenever he was in trouble, it seemed like he did like to target Rome Odunze. And ultimately, the one plus for Odunze as well was Caleb Williams, especially like to target him in the red zone, as Rome Odunze led the team in red zone targets last year.
Do you know how many targets that was, out of curiosity?
I believe he had 17 total red zone targets last year.
Wow, that is really interesting. Yeah, if you didn't say Rome Odunze, I was going to say him.
Yeah.
I think that Rome Odunze. I hope you're right, by the way, because obviously I invested him in our main league, and I wanted him because I thought he was going to be at the caliber of Marvin Harrison Jr. And Malik Neighbors. But it just goes to show, let's not forget, this class is probably going to be historic, right? So let's not forget these guys. And there was a reason why there was so much buzz surrounding Rome Odunze. And honestly, when you listed out those stats, I mean, he was generally a disappointment
Right.
in comparison to guys like Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. But when you read that off, I'm like, that's not a horrible rookie season. We just are spoiled because of the likes of Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, not Marvin Harrison Jr., but Malik Neighbors, right? These guys who just have that immediate impact. That I was like, oh, why hasn't that happened for Rome Odunze? Well, he's obviously a bust. Let's not overreact here. Not to mention, Keenan Allen's no longer there. That's 121 vacated targets. Now, they did draft Luther Burden, which I was a little concerned about, but sounds like he's been having some nagging injuries. And Ben Johnson has been making some kind of odd comments related to him. So I'm not as worried about Luther Burden. And then Colson Loveland, I think he'll be involved, but I don't know if he's going to – maybe he'll get touchdowns. But I don't see him having like a Brock Bowers type of year, especially with Cole Kmet being in the rotation.
Yeah, I do agree. I think ultimately Burden possibly at least in his rookie year here is going to be more of a, gadget player, maybe more of a situational type player. I don't know if he's a guy, he's not just going to come in there and eat all the vacated targets that Keenan Allen left behind. So I think there's going to be plenty of those to go to Rome Odunze. And then I do agree with you. I think, Loveland, he's got a lot of talent, but he feel like he's still, he's a very young player. I feel like he needs to be a little bit more polished and a little bit more experienced. I think that's why it's good that he can learn behind a guy like Holcomb. So I don't know how much of an impact he's going to have in his rookie year on this offense either.
So for my second player, and you're going to see a common theme with all the players I'm going to be talking about here today, and that's going to be wide receiver Roman Wilson of the Pittsburgh Steelers. People forget about him. Last year, Wilson sustained a high ankle sprain in training camp that took him out a number of weeks. And then later on in practice, he aggravated his hamstring injury during practice. So, I mean, it just was not a good year for him as far as durability is concerned. Now, let's think about this year. Who do they have in that receiver room? They obviously traded for DK Metcalf, but really that wide receiver 2 position is up for grabs. George Pickens is no longer on the team. He was traded. 103 vacated targets with Pickens leaving. I thought this was interesting because there's always this talk about Aaron Rodgers as he washed, whatever. And I think a lot of it might be because of, he's a bold personality, and a lot of people maybe don't care for how he carries himself. But this is interesting to me. And think about this. Steelers averaged 29.35 pass attempts a game, right? That was Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Whereas with the Jets, with Aaron Rodgers, even with the Jets and how sloppy they were, they averaged 35.7 pass attempts a game. So you're talking about an additional 6 passing attempts a game. That adds up over the course of the year.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be slinging it 35 times, though. I mean, the Jets' run game was absolutely terrible last year. Arthur Smith, he loves to run the ball. I think, maybe you want to say meet in the middle. Maybe he's, at 32, but I don't expect him to be throwing it 35 times a game. And I don't think that's what the Steelers brought him over to do, at 41 years of age.
I hear you, but also I could see Rodgers telling Tomlin, like, I'm taking over. I'm throwing the ball. Like, maybe Father Time has caught up with him, but Rodgers is Rodgers. He's not going to be told what to do. I don't know. To me, like, I'm curious how that all work out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'd be pretty surprised if Rodgers is throwing it 35 times a game, though.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's head over to your last year 2 breakout. Who is it?
All right. I know this isn't a guy that you're excited about, Steve, but I'm going back to the quarterback position, going the quarterback Drake Maye. And, I think he's poised to have a breakout year this year. I'm excited about what I was able to see from him last year. But to me, he showed a lot of potential in his rookie year. He had 4 top 12 fantasy finishes in just 10 full games that he played last year, and ultimately finished as the QB 23 on the season. He's got, rushing upside, which provides him a nice floor for fantasy, as he averaged 32 rushing yards per game last year. And I think the biggest help is going to be, the coaching change. Not only is it Mike Vrabel taking over as the head coach, but Josh McDaniels coming in as the offensive coordinator, switching from Alex Van Pelt last year. And there's no doubt McDaniels is a far better offensive coordinator than Van Pelt, and just a better situation. But, they upgraded their offensive line, drafted Will Campbell in the draft. They also signed Garrett Bradbury and Morgan Moses in free agency. And then, they added to the wide receiver core, signed Stephon Diggs in free agency, and also drafted Kyle Williams, who I know you and I are both excited about and looks like a promising rookie year.
Yeah, I think May. I don't think it's necessarily a bad pick. I just think that people think he's going to be like going into the upper echelon of quarterbacks and be this elite guy. It's totally possible. I mean, people want to compare him to Josh Allen light, and even Josh Allen in his rookie year and even the year after had some really wobbly performances. So, uh, I, he's an interesting pick. Don't get me wrong. I think he's definitely a high upside. I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want my position to come across like I don't like the guy. I just feel like the hype is just unreal for him. Does he have the ability to do it? Yes, but will Mike Vrabel and or Josh McDaniels really unleash him? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what you mean by unleashing him, but
Well, look at Vrabel. I mean, Vrabel. I mean, he was a ground and pound team with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. I understand Ryan Tannehill had different abilities than Drake Maye. Are they gonna have him have kids gloves, or are they gonna let him say go ahead and rip it, Drake? I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I don't think letting him go out there and rip it a ton of times per game is what it's at. But I think they can set up the parameters within the offense, and he can be efficient with the opportunities that he does have. And I'd expect that run game to be better. And I think also I didn't mention it, but I think adding Trevion Henderson to that backfield adds another dimension, especially in the passing game as well.
All right, so my last year two player that I'm not going to ignore here is wide receiver Ricky Pearsall from the San Francisco 49ers. There's a common theme here. I went with a receiver in each one of these because that last year class was top of the line. And like I mentioned, when it comes to dynasties, you want to go where, the riches are. What is the best position group in the draft? You've got to make sure you leave the draft with that position. But anyways, on to Pearsall. Deebo Samuel's no longer on the team. Right? He got traded to the Washington Commanders. 81 targets vacated. You got Brandon Ayuk. He's going to be starting on the PUP list to begin the year. I'm not so confident that he's going to rehabilitate and be the guy that we remember, at least not this season. Maybe next year he gets back to who he was. Maybe he starts to feel like himself. So who's going to lead the team in targets? You've got Juwan Jennings, who had a really solid season last year. And then you've got Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall had 46 targets, 31 catches, 400 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Now, obviously, he had the gunshot that happened early on in the year. I think that kind of stunted his growth initially because obviously he wasn't on the field. But if you look at even the last 2 weeks of the season, I kind of see a little bit of a glimmer of what I think we could expect. 10 targets, 8 catches, 141 yards, and 1 touchdown. And then the last game of the season, 8 targets, 6 catches, 69 yards, and a touchdown. Both really solid weeks. I think when Kyle Shanahan decided, it was kind of an interesting draft pick to begin with. When we saw that happen, the writing was on the wall, and it seemed like, okay, are they getting rid of Deebo? Like, what's going on here? So I'll be very curious to see. He's not a gadget guy, so I'll be curious to see how they end up using Pearsall going into this offense. But I think he has a prime opportunity to be the number one target in the offense.
Yeah. How do you think, having a healthy Christian McCaffrey, kind of eats into those numbers as well? And then also, obviously you still got George Kittle there, who you didn't mention, who's going to be eating up a lot of targets as well.
Those are both true, but I mean, we can say Christian McCaffrey's healthy. I don't, I kind of, the reports are kind of mixed. I don't know. Like, I mean, let's not forget early on last year, he was the number one pick, and they were saying, oh, yeah, it's just a strain, not a big deal. He'll be ready for week 1. Everybody drafts him, and then right at the beginning of the year, oh, guess what? He's not going to be available for most of the year. You better go pick up Jordan Mason. So it's like, okay, like what else are they going to say? I don't know. I want him to be healthy. He's an electric player. He's great for the league. I don't know. Even if he does play, though, Joe, I mean, I think there's still targets around in this offense. I mean, Juwan Jennings had 113 targets. George Kittle had 94 targets. It could very well be, Jennings or primarily Kittle. We know that Brock Purdy likes to target Kittle quite a bit. But I think we're looking at breakouts, and just based on the roster around him, I think there's an opportunity for him to step up. We've seen guys like Ayuk and Deebo be fringe wide receiver ones. I think sometimes they've been wide receiver ones in your fantasy league. So we've seen the offense produce in that way. I can see Pearsall following the same suit.
Yeah, he definitely could. I mean, the opportunity is definitely there, especially if Ayuk isn't going to be, fully healthy. And like you mentioned, he's going to start the year on the PUP, which is never a good sign. But yeah, if he's not fully healthy, they're going to need somebody to step up because, like you mentioned, they haven't exactly, really added to that wide receiver room either.
So that does it for this episode. We asked the question and answered it. Who is set to break out? We talked about some year 2 players that we just can't ignore. Go ahead and give your feedback of who you think you can't ignore. We'll be happy to go back and forth and exchange as to what you think and give your thoughts about what we think. Before you go, check out our most recent episode. We went through one of our favorites, our top 40 rankings with tiers for Dynasty rookies and including IDP. You're not going to want to miss that. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.